over.
Ray, this is Walter.
The Burbs.
I think The Burbs is a very unique film. It is a comedy, but it's dark. And that commercially was a problem. It was marketed like a light Tom Hanks comedy at the time when Tom Hanks was just doing very light, fun, enjoyable romps. And it has a really dark, kind of mean streak to it that I think was embraced by Joe Dante.
Satanists, huh? Ritual killers.
Burbs is nominally a horror film in that it's about creepy neighbors. When I was a kid, we had people in the neighborhood who people thought were creepy and would make up stuff about what was going on in there, and you couldn't go there on Halloween because we wouldn't come out and all that nonsense. It's a movie about the way these people behave when they're basically bored in their suburban setting and need to invent some excitement for themselves. In the original script, it wasn't explained what the Klopeks were up to. The audience had to imagine it, and so all of these clues of, the strange noises at night and lights and people digging and all that stuff was blithely unexplained. But then when Tom Hanks was cast, the studio said, well, you can't do the ending we've got now. They take him off from an ambulance and he's going to die. You can't kill Tom Hanks. And we shot 3 different endings, one of which is on the Laserdisc, and then one of which got destroyed, where they open up the trunk and the garbage men from earlier in the movie, Dick Miller and Bob Picardo, are in the trunk. And there's another ending where it's full of cheerleaders. That was a topical joke, and none of which it ended up being a bunch of skulls, which we shot later.
Once you've been to hell, everything else pales in comparison.
976 Evil.
976 Evil was Robert Englund's directorial debut, and a lot of people don't know that, especially because it's such a corny idea for a film. But back then, 976 and 1-800 Collect and all that, they were a thing. Toll numbers were kind of a big deal. You would call 976 Evil, and you had a line into the devil.
Welcome to the caverns of the unknown.
You murder this person and I will make you popular. You had this one kid who's this social outcast, and he's kind of nerdy. He is giving the devil what he wants, and he is turning into a demon. His friend is trying to stop him. It's actually kind of a sad, really neat movie. Not as well known as it should be, especially for something with Robert Englund attached. Because at the time, he was huge with Nightmare on Elm Street. My favorite part of that, he's at his house, and he has since killed his caretaker. His friend and his teacher are coming to the house to try to either stop him or save him. It opens up a gateway to hell, and the whole house freezes because hell froze over. So it was kind of a funny little thing that Robert Englund threw in there.
Hell finally froze over.
Pet Cemetery.
Pet Cemetery was directed by Mary Lambert, one of the few female directors in horror at that time. And it scared the crap out of me when I was little. I literally slept with the lights on for months. It's based on a novel by Stephen King, and he had to draw from some aspects of his life. Probably not the cat coming back. But I know that they lived on a country road, and his son actually went out in the street and he had to save him from a big old truck. Gage getting run over is just still, to this day, the most traumatizing thing ever. Just tears every time I see that little foot in his shoe, oh Lord. And he's so sweet.
Pet Cemetery is one of those interesting projects because it touches on a lot of different fears. You have Mary Lambert going into the fear of death and the fear of what happens next. Mary Lambert also confronts, these things that a lot of us don't really talk about, these deep, dark family secrets. Of course, Zelda, who terrified a whole generation of horror fans.
I'm coming for you, Rachel.
The best thing about this movie for me is Fred Gwynn and his Maine accent he's doing. Sometimes dead is better.
Sometimes dead is better.
Well, then why are you taking all these bodies up to the pet cemetery, Fred? Why are you doing that?
When little Miko Hughes jumps out of the attic with his little knife, that was a great scene. I mean, there's some really great scenes in that movie.
He's the one who basically does most of the damage, this tiny little adorable child. When Dale McKiff basically injects Gage with the drugs to essentially kill him at the end, I love when he's walking down the hallway and Gage looks at him and goes, "No fair."
No fair. No fair, no fair.
You don't hear Freddy Krueger when he's getting, killed saying, "No fair." It was towards the end of the 80s where you were starting to see a little bit of a shift in the genre. And then there was a little bit more of a heaviness. And I think Pet Sematary perfectly reflects that.
Friday the 13th, Part 8. Jason Takes Manhattan.
Friday the 13th Part 8 is Jason Takes Manhattan, and people were so excited for him to finally leave Camp Crystal Lake and go to the Big Apple, New York, except he spent the whole movie on a boat. And then when he got to New York, it was actually Vancouver most of the time. My favorite kill from this one is actually kind of a low-key one. It's when he kills Kelly Hoot.
That's another kill that I like. See, I've done so many kills, I forget about some of my favorites. Killing Kelly Hu in the disco, it made me look so much better because it was a very low ceiling on the dance floor. So that we came up with the idea of picking her up by her neck and choking her against the ceiling. Very creative. She was so game to do whatever we needed to do to make it look good, because that couldn't have been comfortable. When I throw the stunt girl, she has to hit the ground without breaking her fall. So those sometimes are the hardest stunts to do because you just have to hit however you hit.
They did do one day in New York City in Times Square, and that's the best part of the movie, this wide circling shot of Jason Voorhees in the middle of Times Square.
We have the entire Times Square area right in the middle as where we're shooting. Hundreds of people are watching. The NYPD is holding people back. I felt like a rock star, man. I never took the mask off that whole night because I didn't want to destroy the image of people watching.
Stepfather 2. Dad is back.
The Stepfather was another one of those great discoveries. I went to an early screening of it knowing nothing about it and was just so impressed by how well it was written, how well it was pulled off, Terry O'Quinn's performance in the lead. It just surprised me in so many ways.
If you've seen the original film, Joe Rubin arranges the bodies of his movie family in a tableau of blood and body parts and gore and stillness and silence. What I liked about our script in Stepfather 2, the continuation of it, is it had an extraordinary macabre variety of humor, a very black, sick, twisted sense of humor. The scene I like best in the film is when he puts the body of Meg Foster's suitor. He murders him, rolls him up in a rug, puts him in the trunk of the car, and then he takes the guy's car to the wrecking yard to dump it. And he spends his time in the wrecking yard wrecking the car, running into things, so it can be camouflaged and stay in the wrecking yard. And we came to the point where we were going to shoot my death scene. The death scene that was originally scripted and shot shows my character going to light a fire in her fireplace, and Terry O'Quinn shoves her head into the gas jet. And for whatever reason, I don't think it necessarily worked very well. I think they wanted something a little more standard. They want to hang you from your wind chimes in your kitchen. It was the prop man's hands that you see around my throat strangling me. And I had to wear a rig, and they hung me up, and there's a cat, and there you go.
In Beverly Hills, what you fear is only the beginning.
Anything for society.
Society is directed by Brian Usna. It looks like it's a 90210 Beverly Hills rich person type of problem situation, but it turns out that this kid's problems are a lot worse than you might expect.
The script was written by Woody Keith and Rick Fry. It was so paranoid. It's not just about a secret society. It's about class. I never could quite call it a horror movie. It was just kind of weirder than that.
Something wrong?
It's a sucker punch of a movie because, of course, it pretends that it's some kind of a mystery and then it turns into something else.
This movie's got conspiratorial elements, some incestual things, and a lot of body transformation courtesy of Screamin' Mad George, and it all culminates in the shunting. What's the shunting? You kinda just have to see it to understand.
There's so many just images that stick with you. Like, I can see it all in my head. Like, everybody's joining, and it's just madness. An orgy of amazingness.
The wettest, goopiest movie I've ever seen, because it's just like people turning people inside out. It definitely showed you that flesh could be super fluid.
The most fun I ever had on a set was doing the shunting, because I just felt like I was doing what I wanted to do. The kid calls his dad a butthead, because back then in the 80s, butthead, it was like a big term.
Fuck you, butthead.
And we thought, yeah, his dad's a butthead. Let's make his dad a butthead.
I guess you're right. I am a butthead.
We had a lot of outtakes that were hilarious. You know, I think everybody's thought their dad maybe was a butthead at one time or another.
Brian really hit it out of the park with that film. It's now finally getting the recognition that it deserves.
Let me give you a hand, Bill.
A lot of my friends were actually kind of embarrassed for me when I showed them Society. I thought it was great.
People think horror movies are kind of mindless, but in actuality, they're a way of making statements about things that people really are afraid to talk about. I always think that horror movies are very healthy because they're a way of taking those fears and exercising, them in a way from your system.
I think the whole reason for repeated viewing of horror movies, particularly the 80s horror movies, was that it was very cathartic.
They speak to the emotions, this variety of emotions, not just the dark emotions of fear and dread.
It's adrenaline, it's a drug. People love that.
The level of artistry is impressive, undeniably. And I think that if you look at the filmmakers today that are working hard to uphold some of the more organic aspects of that work that came out of the 80s, it is definitely homage, and it is definitely growing completely out of boundary pushing and advancements that came out of the 80s that hold up if you go back and watch them today.
The great thing about genre directors in the 80s, they were thinking, what can we make? Not what can we remake? We're in a degenerate era today where all they think about is what can we remake, often titles from the 80s. They were all about the original script. They were all about the original idea. They were all about what hasn't been done before. They were all about what will Hollywood refuse to make. That's what we want to make. There's nobody willing to get down and dirty the way they were in the 80s.
The problem today is everybody's trying to please all the people at all the same time, and you get baby food. You can live on baby food, but it's very boring. Troma is the jalapeno pepper on the cultural pizza, and there are a lot of people who want jalapeno peppers on their cultural pizza, right?
I think as I get older, I don't subscribe to the term guilty pleasure. Maybe when I was a kid, just because I was trying to defend myself and my tastes a little bit more. Now that we have social media and everybody is a film critic, we all have these really oddball tastes. And we should all understand that while I might like Chopping Mall, I could definitely understand why you wouldn't like Chopping Mall. Just love what you love, man.
It's nostalgia. It's just, well, I saw it when I was 11, so it's great. Because there's a certain lizard part of your brain that's never going to be able to look critically at that movie that did it for you at that certain age. And we all have that movie. By that same token, the classics are decided upon by the masses, and we've sort of, it's cool to watch these movies that we liked at the time get this critical reassessment after a number of years, and to see what gets sort of like decided as canon. There's a real dilemma right now in terms of what I've been calling the digital divide. Stuff was on VHS in the 80s, and if it didn't make the leap to DVD, then the odds are that much less that it's going to make the leap to Blu-ray. And now the odds are even much less that somebody's going to like sell that transfer streaming rights somewhere. And there is stuff that has vanished almost. It's film history. We talk about how the silent film era, how 75 or 80% of the films are all gone. We're like, oh, how can that happen? But we're letting it happen again.
It's almost our duty as human beings to carry forth stories, right? And as not only as history, but as just talking about the human conditions. It gives generations the opportunity to transfer information regarding what we think is bad and evil and what good society looks like, what bad society looks like. I think that information is crucial to pass down. Maybe that's the job of the horror movie.